I had always believed that Matthew and I were the perfect couple. We had spent 4 years building a life together, sharing secrets, dreams, and the kind of love that I thought was unbreakable. We had been engaged for a year, and in just a few months, we were supposed to stand in front of our friends and family and say forever. I had spent months planning every detail of our wedding. The invitations had been sent, the venue booked, my dress hanging in the closet. Waiting for the day that I would walk down the aisle and promise myself to the man I had given everything to. But everything changed with one phone call. It was late, well past midnight, when my phone buzzed on my nightstand. I groggily reached for it, frowning at the unknown number. Normally I wouldn't have answered, but some strange sinking feeling in my gut, made me pick up. A woman's voice greeted me, sharp and unrecognizable. "Are you Matthew's fiancé?" I blinked, sitting up in bed. "Who is this?" Pause. Then a breath of irritation. "I thought you should know. I had his baby." I felt my entire body go still. My fingers clenched around the phone, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I don't know who you are, but this isn't funny," I managed to choke out. She let out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm joking? Matthew has been lying to you. He's been with me for over a year. And now I have his daughter." The air left my lungs. No. This wasn't happening. This was some kind of cruel joke. Matthew and I had just had dinner together earlier that night. He had kissed me, told me he loved me, made plans for our future. There was no way. But I heard something in her voice. Something steady, something too certain to be a lie. I gripped the edge of my blanket, my entire body ice cold. "You're lying." "If I was lying, why would I know your name? Why would I know that he leaves your place every morning at 7? Why would I know that he promised to marry both of us?" My breath hitched. "Ask him yourself," she said before hanging up. The phone slipped from my fingers and hit the bed. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing in circles. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to believe this was all a mistake. But deep down I knew. Something inside me knew that Matthew had been keeping secrets. And I needed to hear the truth from his own lips. I waited in the dark, my heart slamming against my chest as I listened for the sound of his key turning in the lock. When the door finally creaked open, I felt my entire body stiffen. He walked in, tossing his keys onto the counter like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just shattered my world. I swallowed, my voice tight. "Tell me it's not true." He froze, his back going rigid. Slowly he turned to face me. "What?" I gripped my phone, my knuckles white. "Tell me you didn't cheat on me. Tell me you don't have a baby with someone else." His eyes flickered, panic flashing across his face before he smoothed it over. "Where is this coming from?" I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to stop shaking. "She called me Matthew. She told me everything." Silence. A long, stretching silence that was so loud it made my ears ring. Then finally he sighed, rubbed his face, let out a breath. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he muttered. Something inside me cracked. "Oh my God," I whispered, stepping back. "It's true." He reached for me, his voice desperate. "It was a mistake. It was only supposed to be one time." I let out a strangled laugh, tears burning in my eyes. "One time? She said you've been with her for a year." He winced and I knew. He wasn't just a liar. He was a coward. I shook my head, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "And you were just going to marry me? Pretend like none of this happened?" He stepped closer. "I was going to fix it." "Fix it?" I choked out. "There's no fixing this." He looked at me then, his blue eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, regret, fear. I didn't care, because in that moment I realized something. This wasn't just about the cheating. This was about the fact that he had looked me in the eyes every single day and lied, that he had let me plan our wedding. Let me dream about our future while knowing that he had already destroyed it. I took a slow, shuddering breath. Then with shaking fingers, I reached for my engagement ring. His eyes widened. "Emma, wait." I pulled it off my finger and set it on the counter. Then I met his gaze one last time. "I hope she was worth it," I whispered. And then before he could say another word, before I could change my mind, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, because this wasn't just the end of our engagement. This was the end of the life I had planned and the beginning of something I never saw coming. I didn't cry right away. I didn't collapse onto the floor, screaming the way women do in movies when their world falls apart. I walked. I walked out of the apartment into the cold night air, barely feeling the chill against my skin. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there, not in the place where I had planned our future, where I had imagined a life that was never real. My feet carried me to a small park near our building and I sat on a bench, staring at nothing. It was over. 4 years. 4 years of love, trust, shared dreams. Gone. And for what? For a mistake? A year-long mistake? A baby that wasn't mine? I should have been sobbing. I should have been breaking down. But all I felt was numb. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced at the screen. Matthew. I ignored it. Then another call. And another. Then a text. Emma, please pick up. I turned my phone off. For once in my life, I didn't want to hear his excuses. I spent the night at a friend's house, curled up on her couch while she ranted about how much she had never liked Matthew, how she always knew he was a liar. I nodded, letting her words wash over me, but I didn't say much. Because deep down, I knew that no matter how many people told me I was better off without him, I still had to feel it for myself. The next morning I went back to the apartment to get my things. I had barely stepped inside when I heard his voice. Emma. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, then turned to face him. Matthew stood in the living room, looking like he hadn't slept. His hair was a mess, his shirt wrinkled, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I thought you weren't coming back," he muttered. "I'm not," I said, walking past him toward the bedroom. "I'm here to get my things." "Emma, wait." He reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "No," I said sharply, turning to glare at him. "You don't get to touch me. You don't get to talk to me like we're still something." He let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. "I screwed up." I laughed bitterly, throwing open the closet doors. "Oh, you screwed up? That's what we're calling it." "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, his voice desperate. "It was never supposed to be serious. She meant nothing to me." I spun around, eyes blazing. "She meant nothing to you? You had a child with her." His face twisted. "I don't want that baby, Emma. I never wanted any of this." Something in my stomach turned. "You don't want her?" My voice was quieter now, but no less deadly. He shook his head. "She was a mistake. This was a mistake. You're the one I love. You're the one I want to be with." I studied him for a long moment. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I realized something. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a coward. He had made a choice. He had broken everything. And now, when he had to face the consequences, he wanted to pretend it had never happened. I turned back to the closet, shoving my clothes into a suitcase. "I don't care what you want." His voice wavered. "Emma, please." I zipped the suitcase, my movements swift and final. "You made your decision, Matthew. Now live with it." He was silent as I grabbed my bag and walked to the door. But right as I stepped outside, he whispered, "I can't lose you." I didn't turn around. I just said the words I should have said years ago. "You already did." Then I walked away. And this time I didn't just leave him. I left behind the version of me who had ever thought I needed him. Life after Matthew wasn't easy. The first few weeks were the hardest. I had spent 4 years picturing a future with him, building a life around the idea that he was my person. Walking away from that meant tearing down everything I had known and forcing myself to start over. At first I kept expecting him to show up, to call to fight for me, but he didn't. The silence was louder than any apology could have been. I threw myself into work, into distractions. I redecorated my apartment, swapping out all the things that reminded me of him. I took on new projects, went out with friends, Did everything I could to convince myself that I was fine, and eventually I started to believe it. Months passed and the pain dulled. The betrayal didn't sting as much. My life was no longer defined by Matthew or what he had done to me. Until the day I got a phone call that changed everything. I was at work sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice, unfamiliar and professional, greeted me. "Is this Emma Carter?" "Yes," I said hesitantly. "My name is Sarah Reynolds. I work in social services." I frowned, adjusting in my seat. "Okay." There was a pause. Then the words that sent ice through my veins. "I'm calling regarding a child, baby girl, 6 months old. Her name is Lillian." Lillian. I didn't know why, but my heart squeezed at the name. I gripped the phone tighter. I don't understand. What does this have to do with me?" Sarah took a breath. "You were previously engaged to a man named Matthew Harding, correct?" My stomach twisted. I barely managed to whisper, "Yes. The child is his daughter." The office around me seemed to fade. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. My voice cracked. I don't understand why you're telling me this." She hesitated. Lillian was abandoned. Her mother left her at the hospital 3 weeks ago. No contact. No return. We've tried to reach the father. I let out a bitter laugh. "Good luck with that." She sighed. "That's the problem. He's refusing to take her." Of course he was. Of course Matthew, the man who had spent months begging me to forgive him, who had claimed to love me, was now turning his back on his own daughter. My hands curled into fists. "So what happens now?" She hesitated again. "We're looking for a guardian. There are no relatives stepping forward. No one wants to claim her. No one. An innocent baby, abandoned by both of her parents. Left to be passed from one stranger to another." Something inside me cracked. I wasn't this child's mother. I had no connection to her. And yet for some reason I couldn't stop picturing her. Alone, confused, left behind before she even had a chance at life. I closed my eyes, taking a shaky breath. I didn't owe her anything. I could have said no. I could have hung up and forgotten this call ever happened. But I knew I wouldn't, because I knew what it felt like to be discarded. To be treated like you didn't matter. And I couldn't let that happen to her. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. What would I have to do? The weight of my own words settled in my chest the moment I said them. What would I have to do? It wasn't a question I had ever imagined asking. I had never planned on becoming a mother, not like this. But as soon as the words left my lips, I knew there was no going back. The social worker, Sarah, explained the process to me in careful, measured sentences. I heard words like temporary custody, background check, placement hearing, but none of it really sank in. Because all I could think about was the baby. Lillian. A child who had been abandoned twice before she even knew what love was. A child who had no one. I spent the next few days buried in paperwork, signing forms I barely understood, meeting with officials who asked me if I was sure I wanted to do this. I wasn't a relative. I wasn't married. I had no legal obligation to this baby. But every time they asked me if I was sure, my answer was the same. Yes. Then came the hardest part, meeting her. The social worker led me down a quiet hallway in the foster care facility, the walls lined with faded pastel murals of animals and flowers. I felt my stomach twist into knots as we reached a small nursery, the air filled with the faint scent of baby powder and soft lullabies playing in the background. "She's inside," Sarah said, pushing the door open. I stepped in, my heart pounding, my breath catching in my throat. She was so small. A tiny bundle in a crib, wrapped in a light pink blanket. Her little fists curled near her face, her chest rising and falling in steady breaths. Dark wisps of hair framed her soft cheeks, and when she stirred slightly, letting out a quiet sigh, I felt something inside me shift. Sarah moved beside me. "She's been a little fussy. The transition has been difficult." I swallowed hard, stepping closer to the crib. "Can I?" Sarah nodded, giving me permission. With trembling hands, I reached down and gently scooped her up. She was warm, fragile. And as I held her against me, feeling the soft weight of her tiny body, I realized something. She wasn't just some abstract concept anymore. She wasn't just Matthew's mistake. She was a person, a baby who needed love. I cradled her carefully, brushing my fingers over her tiny hand. She blinked up at me with wide, dark eyes, so much like his and yet not at all. And in that moment, I made my decision. I wasn't just going to be her temporary guardian. I was going to be her mother. I pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, my voice steady, certain. "You're safe now, Lillian. I've got you." Bringing Lillian home was nothing like I had expected. I had spent days preparing. Buying a crib, stocking up on baby formula. Reading every article I could find on newborn care. Thought I was ready. I wasn't. The first night she cried for hours. I rocked her, bounced her, sang softly under my breath, but nothing worked. Her tiny face was scrunched in distress, her little fists waving in the air as if the entire world was too much for her. Maybe it was. She had been passed from one set of hands to another. Shuffled through cold, sterile rooms with no one constant in her life. No mother, no father, just strangers who came and went. No wonder she was terrified. I held her close, feeling my own exhaustion creeping in. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, pressing my cheek against her soft hair. "You're not alone anymore." I didn't know if she understood the words. But after a while, her cries softened. And by the time she finally drifted off to sleep against my chest, I realized I was crying too. Because this wasn't just hard. This was everything. Motherhood wasn't something I had planned for, but it was happening. And no matter how overwhelming it felt, I had already made my choice. She was mine. The days blurred together into a whirlwind of diaper changes, sleepless nights, and quiet, stolen moments where I marveled at how something so small could take up so much space in my heart. I watched her grow stronger. I saw the way she started recognizing my face. The way her tiny fingers curled around mine with trust. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And so was I. But raising her alone wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I was drowning. The exhaustion, the stress, the constant worry that I wasn't doing enough. It weighed on me. Balancing work and motherhood felt impossible. Some mornings, I barely had time to brush my hair before rushing out the door with Lillian strapped to my chest, praying she wouldn't start crying in the middle of a meeting. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I was truly capable of being what she needed. But every single time, without fail, she reminded me why I was doing this. The first time she smiled at me, my heart nearly broke with how much I loved her. The first time she reached for me, clinging to my shirt with tiny fingers, I knew this was what mattered. It wasn't about having the perfect plan, it wasn't about whether I was ready, it was about showing up, and I was never going to leave her. Not like her parents had, because no matter how hard it was, I had already fallen in love with her, and nothing was going to change that. For months, I built a life around Lillian. It wasn't easy, being a single mother never is, but I had found my rhythm. I woke up before sunrise to get her ready, balanced work with diaper changes, bottle feedings, and endless piles of laundry. Sleep became a luxury I no longer had, and exhaustion was my constant companion, but I was happy. Happier than I had ever been when I was with Matthew. Lillian gave my life a new purpose, a new meaning. I no longer woke up thinking about my past, about the pain and betrayal. Instead, I woke up to soft baby giggles, tiny fingers reaching for me, the quiet love that only a mother understands. I didn't think about Matthew anymore. Not until the day he showed up at my doorstep. It had been an exhausting day. Lillian had been fussy, teething, refusing to nap. And I had barely managed to put her down before I heard the knock at my door. I sighed, rubbing my temples as I went to answer, expecting it to be a package or a neighbor. Instead, I came face to face with the last person I ever wanted to see, Matthew. For a second, I couldn't speak. He looked the same, tall, broad shoulders, the same piercing blue eyes, but there was something different. He looked nervous, almost uncertain. I swallowed hard, gripping the door. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated, glancing past me as if searching for something. I need to talk to you. There's nothing to talk about. I moved to close the door, but he stopped it with his hand. Emma, wait, he said, his voice lower now. I know. I froze. He knew. I didn't have to ask what he was talking about. I could see it in his face, in the way his jaw tightened, in the way he glanced toward the hallway, where Lillian's soft breathing filled the silence. He knew I had adopted her. Slowly I stepped back, arms crossing over my chest. You don't get to walk back into my life after everything. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I didn't know. I laughed bitterly. You didn't know? Of course you didn't. You never cared enough to ask. His face twisted. That's not fair. Isn't it? I cut him off, my voice shaking. You abandoned her, Matthew. You knew she was out there and you chose to walk away. His jaw clenched. I thought she was with her mother. She was, I snapped. Until her mother walked away too. That shut him up. For a moment he just stared at me, something unreadable in his expression. Then finally he spoke. Why did you take her? The question was so simple yet so heavy. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. Because someone had to. He swallowed. You had no obligation. I laughed, shaking my head. No, I didn't. Silence stretched between us. And then he asked the question I had been dreading. Can I see her? Everything inside me went cold. I gripped the edge of the door, my heart pounding. No. His eyes snapped to mine. Emma, come on. No, I repeated firmer this time. You don't get to show up months later and suddenly decide you care. She's my daughter, he argued, his voice rising. I stepped forward, my hands trembling. She was your daughter. Until you left. Until you made it clear you didn't want her. His expression darkened. You don't get to decide that. I let out a sharp breath, my hands curling into fists. I became her mother the moment you stopped being her father. For a second I thought he might fight me, that he might demand something, threaten something, but he didn't. Instead he took a slow step back, nodding stiffly. This isn't over. I held my ground. Yes, it is. Then I closed the door in his face. And as I stood there breathing heavily, listening to Lillian stir in the next room, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of Matthew anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I had something worth fighting for. And I wasn't going to lose. I knew the moment I closed that door that Matthew wasn't going to let this go. And I was right. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe he would just disappear again, that he would realize he wasn't built for fatherhood, that the weight of responsibility was still too heavy for him. Deep down, I knew better. I had seen the look in his eyes before I shut him out. He wasn't just here out of curiosity. He had come because he wanted something. And Matthew never walked away from something he wanted. I spent the next few days trying to shake off the encounter, trying to remind myself that I had every legal right to be Lillian's mother now. But no matter how much I told myself I was safe, I felt that lingering fear clawing at the back of my mind. Then a week later it happened. I was in the grocery store, balancing Lillian on my hip as I scanned the shelves for formula, when I heard a voice behind me that made my stomach drop. Well, isn't this sweet? I turned, my breath catching in my throat. There she was. The woman Matthew had cheated on me with. Jessie. She was standing there in her perfectly tailored designer coat, her manicured nails tapping against her handbag as she eyed me with thinly veiled disgust. But it wasn't me she was looking at. It was Lillian. My grip on the shopping cart tightened. What do you want? She smirked, shifting her weight onto one hip. You already know the answer to that. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. She's my daughter now. Her lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Oh honey, you really think that? Lillian stirred in my arms, pressing her face against my shoulder. I held her closer. Jessica tilted her head. I gave birth to her. And then you left her, I shot back, my voice steady despite the fire burning inside me. Her expression darkened. I didn't leave her. I just needed time. Time. I let out a bitter laugh. It's been once. You didn't even look back. She exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. I wasn't ready. I took a slow, deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Then why are you here now? Jessica's eyes flickered, and I understood. It wasn't about Lillian. It was about control. She had given up her daughter without a second thought. And now that someone else had stepped in, now that someone else had built a life with her, she suddenly wanted to stake her claim. Typical. I adjusted Lillian in my arms. It's too late, Jessica. She scoffed. You think a piece of paper makes you her real mother? I met her gaze without flinching. No, but showing up every day, loving her, protecting her, that makes me her mother. For a split second, something flickered in her expression, something almost like guilt. Then just as quickly, it was gone. I'll be seeing you, Emma, she said, turning on her heel and striding out of the store like she hadn't just thrown a grenade at my life. I stood there, my entire body rigid, my breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. And I knew this wasn't over. I pressed a kiss to Lillian's soft curls, whispering a promise I intended to keep. No one is taking you from me. I had always heard that custody battles were brutal. I just never thought I would be in one. I spent weeks holding my breath, waiting for the moment Matthew and Jessica would make their next move. I told myself maybe it was all just empty threats, that maybe, once they realized how much effort it would take, they would disappear again. But then one day, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. A petition for custody. They were suing me. For months, I had been raising Lillian, waking up in the middle of the night when she cried, rocking her back to sleep, kissing her tiny hands and promising her she would never be alone again. She had become my world, my family, my daughter. And now these people who had abandoned her, discarded her like she was nothing, thought they could just take her back. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the legal papers, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break apart. I wasn't just angry, I was furious, and I wasn't going to let them win. The next day I hired the best lawyer I could afford. She was sharp, direct, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. They have a biological claim, she told me. That doesn't mean they'll win, but it does mean they have a case. I clenched my fist. But they abandoned her. She nodded. And that's what we'll use against them. I spent the next several weeks preparing for battle. I had to provide records of everything. Proof that I had been caring for Lillian, doctor visits, expenses, even testimony from friends and neighbors. My lawyer warned me that they would come after me personally, that they would try to make me seem unfit. I didn't care. I was ready. The first court hearing was worse than I imagined. I sat in the courtroom, my hands folded tightly in my lap as Matthew and Jessica sat across from me. They looked polished, well-rehearsed, their expensive lawyer making them sound like devoted parents who had just made a temporary mistake. I wanted to scream. They had never cared about Lillian before. They had never lost sleep over her cries, never spent nights worrying about whether they were doing enough, never loved her the way I did. And yet now they sat there, pretending like they had always wanted her. Then came the part one had been dreading. Their lawyer stood, his expression neutral but his words sharp. Miss Carter, you are an unmarried woman, correct? I straightened in my seat. Yes. And you work full-time? Yes. He paced slightly, flipping through his notes. No husband. No family support. No prior experience as a parent. And yet, you expect this court to believe that you can provide a better home for this child than both of her biological parents. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. I don't expect the court to believe anything, I said. I expect the court to look at the facts. He raised an eyebrow. And what facts are those? I met his gaze, unflinching. The fact that they abandoned her, I said. The fact that I was the one who stepped up when no one else did. The fact that I have loved and cared for her every single day while they were off living their lives. Jessica scoffed from across the room. That's not true. I turned toward her, my voice steady. You left her. I picked her up. The judge silenced the room, but I saw something shift in the way he looked at me. He wasn't just seeing a single woman fighting a legal battle. He was seeing a mother. The hearings dragged on for months. Each time I had to listen to Matthew and Jessica try to paint themselves as victims to convince the court that they deserved a second chance. Each time I fought back harder. I submitted everything. Medical records, witness statements, a journal I had kept since the day I took Lillian home. But the hardest moment came when they asked me a simple question. "Miss Carter, why do you want to keep this child?" I took a breath, my voice thick with emotion. "Because she's mine," I whispered. "Not by blood, not by birth, but by every choice I've made since the day I met her." I looked over at Lillian, sitting quietly with a caretaker in the courtroom, her little hands clutching the stuffed bear I had given her. "She is my daughter," I said, my voice stronger now, "and I will never abandon her." For the first time, Matthew and Jessica looked uncertain, because they knew, deep down they knew, that I had already won. I just needed the judge to see it too, and I prayed with everything in me that he would. The legal battle drained me. Every court hearing felt like a war. Every motion filed was another fight to prove that I was the real mother, not just some placeholder until her real parents decided they were ready. I barely had time to think about anything else. My days were filled with paperwork, meetings with my lawyer, sleepless nights spent wondering if the system would fail me. But through it all, there was one person who reminded me that I was more than just this battle. I met Ethan by accident. One of those chance encounters that you don't realize is important until later. It happened at a coffee shop, of all places. I had just come from another exhausting meeting with my lawyer, my head pounding, my arms full of legal documents and baby supplies. Lillian was in my arms, fussing, squirming, making it impossible to balance my coffee while I tried to dig my keys out of my bag. And then, just as my coffee nearly slipped from my grasp, a steady hand reached out and caught it. "Whoa, careful there." I looked up, already flustered, and found myself staring into warm brown eyes. The man in front of me smiled, handing my coffee back. "You look like you're carrying half the world in your arms," he said. I let out a breathless laugh. "Some days it feels that way." He nodded toward Lillian, who had stopped fussing long enough to stare curiously at him. "She's adorable." "Thank you," I said, shifting her weight in my arms. There was a brief pause, then he extended a hand. "I'm Ethan." I hesitated for only a second before shaking it. "Emma." From that moment things just happened. We ran into each other again the next week, then again at the grocery store. Each time he smiled, asked about my day, made me feel, if only for a moment, like I wasn't drowning. At first I didn't think much of it. I wasn't looking for anything. My entire world revolved around Lillian and I had no space for anything else. But Ethan never pushed, he just showed up. And slowly, without meaning to, I started to look forward to seeing him. One afternoon, after another exhausting court hearing, I found myself at the park, watching Lillian babble to herself in the stroller. I felt so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of pretending I wasn't terrified of losing her. And then out of nowhere, Ethan sat down beside me on the bench. "You look like you could use a distraction," he said, handing me a cup of coffee. I took it, grateful. "How did you know I was here?" "I didn't." He smiled. "Guess I just have good timing." I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "You always seem to." For a moment, we sat in silence, sipping our coffee. Then he spoke. "I don't know everything about what you're going through," he said carefully. "But I do know you're doing something incredible." I glanced at him, my throat tightening. "It doesn't feel that way." "It never does," he admitted. "But trust me, one day you're going to look back and realize just how strong you were." I swallowed hard, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. Because no one had said that to me before. People had told me I was brave, that I was kind, that I was doing the right thing. But no one had ever said I was strong. I looked at Ethan, then really looked at him. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was space in my life for something more. For weeks, the custody battle consumed my life. Every day was another court filing, another legal consultation, another night spent pacing the apartment with Lillian asleep in my arms, wondering if I was doing enough. But no matter how much I worried, no matter how much I prepared, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about legalities. This was a battle between the person I used to be and the person I had become. And Matthew hated that he no longer had control over me. Started with the little things, a text message out of nowhere, can we talk? I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. I hadn't spoken to him outside of court in weeks, and I had no interest in changing that. I ignored the message. A few days later, another. You don't have to do this alone. This time I laughed. Alone. Where had he been for the past 6 months? Where had he been when Lillian needed a father? I deleted the message without responding. Then one night he showed up. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted, carrying Lillian in one arm and a bag of groceries in the other, when I saw him standing outside my apartment building. My heart clenched. Not with longing, not with fear, but with anger. I adjusted Lillian, holding her closer. What are you doing here? Matthew took a step forward, his expression unreadable. I just want to talk. I let out a sharp breath. There's nothing left to say. Emma, come on. His voice softened like it used to when he wanted to get his way. Can we just go somewhere? Get a coffee? I scoffed. You think we're just going to catch up? He rubbed the back of his neck, sighing. Look, I know I handled things badly. I laughed. Actually laughed. Badly? Matthew, you abandoned your own daughter. His jaw tightened. I didn't know what to do. I stared at him, shaking my head. And now you do. Now that I've been the one raising her, now that I've been the one waking up at 3 a.m. when she's sick, now that I've done everything alone, you suddenly think you can just waltz back into our lives. He hesitated. I made a mistake, Emma. I adjusted my grip on Lillian, who let out a soft sigh against my shoulder. No, I said quietly. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something you don't mean in an argument. What you did, that was a choice. Matthew exhaled, shoving his hands into his pockets. I want to fix things. I stared at him for a long moment. There was a time when those words would have broken me, when I would have second-guessed everything, when I would have wanted desperately to believe him. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I had outgrown him, and that terrified him. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You don't get to rewrite history. He swallowed. Emma. No, I cut him off, my voice steady. I loved you once. I thought you were my future. And for a long time I let you have so much power over me. But that's over. His blue eyes flickered with something. Panic, frustration, realization. You don't get to manipulate me anymore, I continued. You don't get to pretend like you care now that you've realized I don't need you. He opened his mouth, then closed it, because he knew he had lost. Not just the custody battle. Not just Lillian. He had lost me. I turned away, walking toward my building. Stay away from us, Matthew. He didn't follow. And as I stepped inside holding my daughter close, I smiled. Because for the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I had won. Not in court, but in life. I didn't hear from Matthew after that night. Maybe he realized there was nothing left to fight for. Or maybe his pride couldn't handle the fact that I had shut him out so completely. Either way, I was finally free from him. But the battle wasn't over yet. The final court date loomed ahead, the day that would decide whether Lillian legally remained my daughter or if Matthew and Jessica could claim her back. I had never been more terrified in my life. No matter how much evidence we had, proof of their abandonment, records of my care for her, statements from pediatricians and neighbors, there was still the cold reality of the legal system. Biology carried weight. It was written in laws, in statutes, in outdated ideas of what made a family. But I knew the truth. Family wasn't written in DNA. Family was the hands that held you in the middle of the night when you were scared. Family was the person who wiped your tears, who kissed your bruises, who never, ever walked away. And I was the only one who had been that for Lillian. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully, my hands only shaking a little as I buttoned my blouse. Ethan was waiting outside my apartment when I stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee. I frowned. What are you doing here? He grinned, handing me one of the cups. Moral support. I hesitated. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted, his voice softer now. You don't have to do this alone, Emma. Something inside me cracked, because for so long I had done everything alone. I had convinced myself that I had to, that no one else could carry this weight but me. But maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to anymore. I nodded, gripping the coffee tightly. Thank you. When we arrived at the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. Matthew and Jessica were already there, sitting on the opposite side of the room. Jessica looked bored, flipping through her phone. Matthew kept glancing at me, but I refused to acknowledge him. Then the judge entered and the hearing began. It was brutal. Their lawyer painted a picture of two parents who had made a mistake, but who now desperately wanted a chance to be in their daughter's life. They had money, stability, a biological claim. I had nothing but my love for her. And as I sat there listening to them talk about how they deserved to raise the child they had abandoned, something inside me snapped. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, my hands steady. I won't waste this court's time pretending I have more money or a bigger house than them, I said. I don't. I turned, looking at the judge directly. But I have something they don't. I have never left Lillian. I took a slow breath, my voice unwavering. When she woke up crying in the middle of the night, I was there. When she was sick, I was the one who held her, who rocked her until she fell asleep. I was the one who whispered promises to her that she would never be alone again. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. I wasn't there the day she was born. I wasn't there when she took her first breath. But I have been there every single day since she was left behind. I have chosen her. Over and over again, I turned to Jessica and Matthew. They never did. The courtroom was silent. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Matthew clenched his jaw. But the judge was listening, and that was all that mattered. After hours of testimony, the judge finally spoke. This court does not take custody matters lightly, however. After reviewing the evidence, it is clear that the best interests of the child must come first. The petition for parental rights is denied. Full legal custody is granted to Ms. Carter. I felt my breath leave my lungs. I had won. I turned to Ethan, barely processing the way he grinned, the way he squeezed my hand. And then I turned to Lillian, sleeping peacefully in my arms. She was mine, forever. The day I walked out of that courtroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. For months, I had lived with fear clawing at my throat, with the uncertainty of whether or not I would lose Lillian. Every day had felt like a battle, every night had been filled with worries that I wasn't enough, that I was just a single woman fighting against a system that valued biology over love. But I had won. Lillian was mine. Forever. The papers made it official, but the truth was she had always been mine. From the moment I held her in my arms, from the moment I whispered that she would never be alone again, I had chosen her, over and over again. And now no one could take her away from me. The first thing I did when we got home was hold her close, breathing in the scent of baby lotion and soft cotton pajamas. She had no idea what had just happened, no idea that today was the day I legally became her mother. But she felt it, the security, the love, the home I had built for her. And that was all that mattered. As the months passed, life slowly settled into something good, not perfect because no life is, but real. The sleepless nights didn't disappear, but they didn't feel so heavy anymore. The exhaustion was still there, but it was a weight I carried willingly. And through it all, Ethan was there. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He just stayed. He became a constant presence in our lives, showing up when I needed him and even when I didn't realize I did. He held Lillian like she was made of something precious, making her laugh in a way that made my chest ache with something I couldn't name. One evening, as we sat on the couch after putting Lillian to bed, I looked at him and saw something I hadn't let myself see before. The future. Not the one I had planned years ago. Not the one I thought I wanted, but one that was better. He caught me staring and smiled. What? I hesitated, then said, "Do you think love is something that happens to us or something we choose?" He thought about it for a moment, then leaned back. "I think it's both." I traced a pattern on the couch, my voice softer now. "I don't think I ever chose love before. I think I just expected it to happen. Like it was something I deserved instead of something I had to fight for. Ethan reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady. And now? I took a deep breath. Now I know love is a choice. The way I chose Lillian. The way I chose to fight for her. I turned to him, my heart hammering in my chest. The way I'm choosing you. His eyes softened, his fingers tightening around mine. Emma, he murmured, and I didn't let him finish. As I already knew, I leaned in, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that felt like home. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I had won more than just the custody battle. I had won my life back. I had won a love that wasn't conditional, that wasn't built on empty promises. I had won a family, a real one. And as I stood in my home, holding my daughter, feeling Ethan's steady presence beside me, I knew this was just the beginning of something beautiful.